front of you, ठीक है? So questions भी मैंने कहा था मुझे I got one question, one person sent me, ठीक है, the answers. तो ionic compounds में I told you that it's a metal and a non-metal. The metal loses electrons, becomes a positive ion. The non-metal gains electrons. So it's always a positive ion and a negative ion. Group 1 का charge +1 होता है. Group 2 is +2. Group 3 is +3 and so on. Group 5 is -3. Group 6 is -2. And group 7 elements are -1. So you had a positive ion and you had a negative ion. And I told you that there's a thing called crisscross if you want to figure out the formula directly without drawing any dot and cross diagrams. Okay, Mg ion lost 2 electrons, so you would need 2 fluorines so that they can accept 2 electrons. So the formula was Mg with 2 fluorines, 2 negative ions. So the quick way of doing that was that charges को equal करना है. So if there's one Mg, there should be 2 fluorines. Mg is 2 plus, F is -1. How did I know Mg is 2 plus? Because it's in group 2. How did I know that F is -1? Because it was in group 7. So आप crisscross करते हो and you end up making the formula. ठीक है, that's it. And the other thing was the other thing was that if you have many examples किए थे, aluminium, fluorine, aluminium group 3, that's +3. Fluorine is -1. So bring the 1 over here. There's going to be 1 aluminium and there's going to be 3 fluorines. Okay, so it's going to be AlF3. Calcium and N kiya tha. So we did all of that. You just do crisscross and you get the formula. And then we did discuss that it's not limited to polyatomic. It's not limited to elements. Sometimes you have molecules that end up gaining and losing electrons, and you have to remember the formula of these molecules. So you have to remember what's a hydroxide, what's a nitrate, what's a sulfate, carbonate, phosphate, etc., sulfite. In सारों के formulas you must know that what happens is that a molecule like OH over here, it had 1 electron missing in its outer shell, this 1 electron over here. So it needed that 1 electron. This electron was with sodium. Sodium is a metal. Metals lose electrons. So that electron ended up with OH over here. So this entire molecule ended up having a -1 charge. Its outer shell got completed, but it got completed by gaining an electron. So it became -1. So in Sarokera formulas, you just have to remember the formulas of these polyatomic ions. And we did examples of making formulas of these compounds. And I told you that even examples, I'll just do a few questions. Okay, the names and formulas of these polyatomic ions, they have to be memorized. You have to, at all costs, you have to memorize these. This is the most important thing in entire chemistry at the moment. You got to memorize. You should know what a phosphate is. You should know what a sulfite is, what a sulfate is, what's a hydrogen carbonate, what is the formula of that particular ion, that it's HCO3 and it's got a -1 charge overall. So going back, I'll just do a few examples over here. Okay, I told you I'm going to pick aluminium. I told you that let's try and make formulas of aluminium with all the polyatomic ions, like aluminium hydroxide. Aluminium is group 3, so that's +3. Hydroxide is, if you look at the table that's given in the WhatsApp group as well, okay, OH, hydroxide is OH with a charge of -1. If you do crisscross, it's going to be Al would be 1, and OH, put a bracket around it, OH will be 3. There would be 3 hydroxide ions. As aluminium nitrate, what is aluminium? That's group 3, that's +3. What's a nitrate? TK, you just if you remember this, nitrate is this one. It's NO3 with a charge of -1. So all you have to do is it's NO3 and it's got a charge of -1. If you do crisscross, it's going to be Al will be 1 and NO3 1 लिखने की जरूरत नहीं है, ठीक है? So Al will be 1 and there would be 3 NO3s. Put a bracket around NO3. Sulfate, that's aluminium sulfate, so +3. SO4 is -2. Do crisscross and it's going to become Al2 and SO4 will be, so there will be thrice. ठीक है? Aluminium carbonate, that's aluminium +3. Carbonate in the table, it's CO3 with a charge of -2. So all you have to do is do crisscross. It's going to be Al will be 2 and carbonate will be 3. Because that's how you're going to deal with polyatomic ions. ठीक है ये सारा clear है कि crisscross and how do you make polyatomic ion? How do you make the formula of ionic compound? One positive ion, the other one negative ion. Just do crisscross. That's it. सारों को clear है? Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
ठीक है. One second. कोई questions तो नहीं? Any questions? You just have to memorize that stuff. ठीक है. So now this is something that's very basic. ठीक है. And you must, and it has to be on your fingertips. Aluminium, agar, let's say phosphate, that's I said now this one is there's one important point about crisscross, and that is that if I do aluminium phosphate, aluminium is group 3, phosphate is -3, right? If I do crisscross, it's going to become Al3 and PO4 would also be 3. Okay, based on the crisscross, there would be 3 aluminiums and there would be 3 phosphates. Remember this, that in crisscross, the ratio has to be the simplest ratio, like this 3:3. It has to be the simplest. It has to be at all costs the simplest ratio. So since it's got to be a simplest ratio, 3:3 will become actually 1:1. So it's going to be 1 aluminium and 1 PO4. And obviously you don't need to write 1. But if you had just written it AlPO4, that would have been sufficient. So just make sure 1:3, that's simplified. 2:4, that's simplified. 1:3, that's simplified. I'm not talking about what's inside the bracket. I mean, this thing is 2, this entire thing is 3, right? It's 2:3. That cannot be simplified further. So it's got to be the simplest ratio. Or एक और चीज है कि in your periodic table, when you're discussing ions, there are transition metals as well. That's the block in the middle. Okay, so you've got transition metals. Now, transition metals, they have a charge. They have a positive charge, but it's a variable charge. They can be +1, they can be +2, and they can also be +3. बल्कि कुछ भी हो सकता है, ठीक है? They can even be +6. So they have variable charges. So usually what happens is that for transition metal, the charges are written in the formula. Okay. Hani, I can share the notes. I can share the board link as well. ये बल्कि मैं भी share कर लेता हूँ. You can copy the. I think I've shared the board link in the group. एक संसारों को मैं भेजता हूँ. ठीक है, this board will always be there. ठीक है, all the notes will always be there. At the end of the day, once the chapter is completed, मतलब जैसा पिछला chapter है ना atomic structure, I'll share the PDF as well. Just ask me. Sometimes I just become a bit lazy. I don't open the board, but let me know. I'll share the PDF of the previous board as well. So transition metals, they have variable charges. Like iron is a transition metal. Hopefully everyone knows what a transition metal is. It's the block that's in the middle. Fe could be 2+. It can also be 3+. So it can have variable charges. So how do you know what charge does it have? So the charge will be written in Roman in the formula. Like they'll tell you that it's iron 3 carbonate. So the charge is going to be there in the formula, inside the formula. So iron 3 का मतलब है कि iron has a charge of +3. And carbonate is, you can just have a look, it's CO3 with a charge of -2. If you do crisscross, it's going to be Fe will be 2 and CO3 will be, there'll be 3 CO3s. Okay, make sure put a bracket around it. Okay, it's you can't change the formula. It's CO3, that's the ion, and there would be 3 of them. Okay, if you do crisscross, it's going to be CO3 and then put a bracket and then thrice. So this is how you figure out the formula of ionic compounds. Okay, any ionic compounds. If you remember the polyatomic kinds. So moving on. Okay, now this is something basic. We're going to return to this. Okay, we're going to do this quite a lot. Like you can't make an equation until you know how to make a formula. So we'll be practicing this a lot. अब ये कि now most of the equations now we're going to move towards equations, but most of the equations are related to acids and bases and salts. Okay, so we now have to now we figured out how to make a formula of an ionic compound. One positive ion next to a negative ion. Now what we're going to do is we're going to try and figure out what acids and bases are and their formulas. Most reactions are going to be related to acids and bases. I said definition of an acid, definition of a base. Does anyone know any definition what an acid is, or what does it do? What are its properties? Acid का बता दो कि what's an acid? कोई idea किसी को? What's an acid? Ayan, Amna, Urba, Rabi, any idea what's an acid? Or any property or anything? Okay, what does it do? चलो एक आया, that's a I mean, citric is an acid. So, I mean, so basically, चलो ठीक है. So lots of natural compounds have, like that's a version of an acid, citric acid. ठीक है? It's in citrus fruits. You've got malic acid. That's in apples. ठीक है? लिख देते हैं. This one is in apples. Citric acid is in citrus fruits, lemons, and oranges. ठीक है? एक घर पे होता है. You got vinegar as well. That's acetic acid. So we are actually made out of an acid, and that acid is known as amino acid. ठीक है? Our building block of all the proteins in our body. That's like my hair are made up of an amino acid. That's the building block of almost all living organisms. So naturally, lots of acids around. शक्ल भी दिखा देता हूँ. This is what a citric acid would look like. It's like if you can formula just a second. Uh, this is how it looks like. Okay, that's the one on the. As I said, it's the one on the right side. That's what a citric acid molecule looks like. But still, so basically, the idea is that lots of substances have acids in them. Properties क्या होती हैं? What are the properties of acids? Like, what do they do? Yeah, let's say, चलो एक तो वो सबको पता होना चाहिए कि what does it do to a litmus paper?
Sir, it turns red.
ठीक है, so litmus paper turns red. Turns red. And litmus paper turns red. Yeah, that's what an acid is. It's got a sour taste. There are other properties as well. It's got a sour taste. It's bitter. You can't. I mean, if you look at lemons, it's bitter. It's sour, and what else? It's corrosive. Corrosive means that it can corrode metals. It's dangerous for the human skin as well. And so these are some properties. So you got acids everywhere around you, right? Uh, but they're only corrosive if they are concentrated in large quantity. Otherwise, they would probably not be that harmful. But lemons, you're actually drinking them, right? Your stomach has a lot of acid, right? Your stomach has hydrochloric acid in it. So, but it's only corrosive, or it will only create a burning sensation if it's very concentrated. अच्छा bases की क्या properties होती हैं? Bases are the exact opposite. Bases are I mean they've got I mean, most soaps are actually bases.
Sir, detergents.
Hmm?
Detergents.
Yeah, I mean those are bases, and they would turn litmus paper blue. Okay, so litmus paper would turn blue, and they're also corrosive if they are concentrated. Okay, so most of the soaps that you use, they're definitely bases. Acha, but now acids and bases. I'll just come to the point now. Okay, these are just general properties. Acids and bases are something which are very important in chemistry. Okay, you hear about pH. Okay, have you heard about the word term pH? If you haven't, we'll discuss that later. But uh, people are always measuring pH when they're talking about chemistry. Now, chemistry is happening all around you. Yeah, most of biology is basically chemistry. Most of the reactions that are happening in the human body, that's chemistry. Most of the reactions that are happening in the sea, it's basically chemistry happening, right? In the atmosphere, it's chemical reactions that are happening, and you're making different products, from paints to pharmaceuticals to hydrocarbons. They're all chemical reactions happening. Now, what is an acid? That's the question. Like, I mean, we know what the properties are. What we haven't yet figured out is, how do you define an acid? So acid is this thing. Acid is a molecule that produces H plus 1 ions. And the word that is used for it is a proton donor. A proton is basically an H plus 1 ion. And a base is the exact opposite. A base is a proton acceptor, which basically means that it accepts H plus 1 ions. Okay, that's your technical definition of what an acid and what a base is. Why do I call an H plus 1 ion a proton? Because an H plus, a hydrogen atom only has kitne protons and kitne electrons. It's got one proton and it's got one electron only. So there's one proton in the middle with a positive charge, and you got one electron that's on the outside, right? I said that's what an H is, hydrogen atom. If it's plus one, that means कि वो जो एक electron है ना, that's also gone, right? So that electron is gone. So what are you left with? You're just left with one proton, right? So when you refer to the term H plus one, that's basically just a proton. It's got nothing else. It's just one proton. So the thing is that this H plus one is often referred to as a proton. Okay. So so this is visually speaking, this is what an acid will do. So acid is some random molecule, whatever it is. I don't care. It could be any random molecule. It can come in any different shape or size. So here's an acid, a molecule of acid. What does it do? It's a proton donor. So what it does is, so imagine a molecule that's floating around you, and it releases H plus 1. So if anyone needs H plus 1, it will give it to that thing. Okay, so think of this molecule that is giving off H plus 1 ions. That's what an acid is. And a base is the exact opposite. It's a molecule, and that molecule is, if there's H plus 1 in the neighborhood, they're going to grab it and they're going to accept it. Okay, they're going to consume it. So they consume H plus 1 ions. They accept or they gain H plus 1 ions. So those are bases. So generally speaking, it's just some random molecule that releases H plus one, and if there's another random molecule that accepts H plus one ions, this one is an acid, the other one is a base. That's the general idea of what an acid and a base. That's the main function of what an acid and a base do. Okay, that's the main function. Um, so when you talk about citric acid is basically doing this. कि जब आप उसको ना if you drink lemon juice or lemonade, the citric acid is actually releasing a lot of H+O9s in your mouth, which is why you have this bitter taste, sour taste. Okay? The base does the exact opposite. It accepts H+O9s. Okay? So you the general definition, and this is what you're going to write in the paper. If they're going to ask you what an acid is, what a base is, you're not going to talk about the properties. You're just going to use this one statement. An acid is a proton donor, a base is a proton acceptor. That's it. Okay? No further explanation is required. Okay? अच्छा तो ये definition clear है what an acid and a base is that clear? Soeb, Shoaib,
Yes, sir.
Rabia, or why is this clear? So clear है, कोई question नहीं है किसी का? अच्छा so okay, so the next thing is, why is H plus one so important? Why are we giving this thing so much importance? कि मतलब क्या हो गया कि अगर किसी ने H plus one release कर लिया, क्या हो गया किसी ने H plus one accept कर लिया? Why is that even important? Why is that even relevant? So does anyone know why H plus one is so important that we have to study it? Why not some other ion? Why not some molecule releasing sodium ions and some other molecule accepting sodium ions? Why not some molecule releasing Cl minus one ions and the other one accepting Cl minus one ions? Why are we so interested in H plus one ions? कोई idea वैसे कोई तुक्का लगा दो कि why is H plus one so important? मतलब उसको पूरा एक chapter
It's
बना.
reactive.
Hmm?
It's reactive. It's reactive.
These, for example, sodium ions, yeah, some other ions are way more reactive, right? So not really reactive.
It only has one proton.
But then why is that important? There's a question, why is H plus one important? मतलब इसी को क्यों पढ़े? Why not some other ion? ठीक है? So what is the importance of H plus one? So now let me tell you why are we studying this? ठीक है? Why is it so important in chemistry? ठीक है? मतलब इतना basic सा concept है and there's nothing to it, but why do we have to study this? I said, why is H plus one important? The thing is, it's not H plus one that's important. Okay, it's actually water that's important. Okay, so the importance is of water. I said, why is water important? Because water is kind of a medium that enables all the reactions on planet Earth to happen. Okay, let's imagine I've got water molecules, right? Lots of them. So why is the chemistry that's happening on planet Earth? Yeah, generally, why is there no reactions happening on Mars, or why is there? I mean, why don't you see plants growing on Mars or the moon? Because they don't have any water. So how does? अच्छा जहाँ पे भी water नहीं होगा, chemistry will stop. You go to the Sahara Desert, all of a sudden there are no plants growing. There are no reactions happening. You can't see animals. But if you see an animal, there's a lot of reactions happening inside the animals, right? So you remove water, and all of a sudden chemistry stops. But the body में if you remove water, all of a sudden all my reactions will stop. ठीक which means I'll die. ठीक So water, I mean, I have to drink lots of water every day to keep alive. ठीक Without water, I won't function. None of my reactions will happen. So why? So the thing is, water is extremely important because it's not that any reaction needs water. Water is kind of a movable medium that is present. Planet Earth, the surface है that's 70% water. Every animal, plant, every living being, that's 70% water. I said, so how does water help? Water is like a medium that enables the other particles to float around. So let's say there's this particle X, and it wants to react with this particle y. Now they can only react if they come close to each other, right? And they meet each other, and there's going to be a reaction, right? So X has to meet Y, so a reaction happens. So how does water help? Water helps you float the particles. If the particles are moving around, right, eventually this X will go and meet Y, and they will end up having a reaction. Agar pani na ho, like there's this X and there's this Y. Let's say they're sitting on the surface of moon. X यहाँ पे पड़ा हुआ है, Y वहां पे पड़ा हुआ है. And here's the surface of the moon. Now, nothing will happen. They will never meet each other. ठीक है, let's say X and Y are वो Sahara desert में ना, the one X is lying on one side and Y is lying on the other side. Nothing will happen because they'll never meet, right? So the point is, water is kind of a medium that helps the other reactions happen because the other particles are floating around it. Okay? How does the oxygen that I breathe reach my cells? The way they reach my cells is through water because some molecule gains that oxygen and that molecule is floating in water, which is my blood. My blood is basically water, right? And that water eventually flows into my cells, and so that oxygen molecule that I breathe in eventually gets carried all the way to my cells. So that's how reactions happen. And the moment you stop, like if you remove the water, the particles will not be able to meet each other. Okay? So the idea clear है why water is important, right? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
So Mars के ऊपर ना you don't see any chemistry happening, you don't see any reactions happening. क्योंकि Mars में ना अगर एक particle कहीं पड़ा हुआ है तो दूसरा particle कहीं और पड़ा हुआ है, they will never plants. How do plants absorb particles? They absorb it through water. They actually absorb water, and the particles in the soil they get carried up along with the water, right? So water का खुद कोई काम नहीं है. It's just that water is important as a medium, right? Now, तो पहली चीज तो clear होगी. So all the reactions that are happening in a situation like this. Like all the reactions that are happening in my cell has water in it, right? So if it's got water inside it, the particles are floating in water. My blood has water in it, right? The plants, you have to give them water every day. The moment you stop giving plants water, they die. Because their particles will not float around and they won't be able to move around. अच्छा, water के ऊपर थोड़ा सा आ जाते हैं डिटेल में, ठीक है? So water is, what is the formula of water? That's an oxygen that is bonded to a hydrogen, and this oxygen is bonded to another hydrogen. ठीक है? अच्छा, श्रेय पता नहीं आपका पॉइंटर आ गया बीच में. I don't know how to. तो उस ऊपर ना वो श्रेय, can you write on this board? वैसे मैं देख रहा हूँ why. Sorry, you won't be able to write. अच्छा, anyways, चलो वो you can use the. चलो बस उसको थोड़ा साइड पे कर लो, ठीक है? अच्छा, so you got. अच्छा, now let's focus on water a bit. Now here's a water molecule. It's one oxygen bonded to two hydrogens. That's the structural formula. Oxygen is group 6. Group 6 का क्या होता है? Group 6 makes two bonds. So it's making one bond and one bond. So that's two bonds. Now imagine lots of these water molecules. को थोड़ा सी तरीके से draw कर लेते हैं. So imagine you've got lots of water molecules, and those water molecules are all bumping into each other. So you've got lots and lots of water molecules, and they're all. पानी में क्या होता है? You've got all these water molecules, and they're all colliding and bumping into each other. So let's say I've got 5 water molecules, and all of them are randomly. अच्छा, so तब थोड़ा water के ऊपर focus कर लें. So I've got these 5 water molecules, and all of them are randomly just liquid water, where the particles are moving around, right? So they're randomly colliding with each other. So now what will happen is, because sometimes during this collision, कि एक पार्टिकल वाटर का दूसरे पार्टिकल से कोलाइड कर रहा है. So let's say sometimes during a collision, if I have two water molecules and they have certain kinetic energy, that like you're boiling water and the particles are, so they might collide with each other very, very violently. तो ये पार्टिकल जो है ना वो यहाँ से आ रहे हैं and it might hit this particle that's in this direction, and when they undergo a collision, some of the water molecules might break up into pieces, and so ये जो water molecule है, it might break over here and this water molecule might break over here, and just like a collision, just now when you collide two things, it breaks into pieces, right? So the water molecule breaks into pieces and it ends up producing an OH minus 1 ion, and this one produces, it breaks off and produces an H plus 1 ion. Same goes over here. This H plus 1 breaks off and produces an H plus 1 ion. And sorry, this is the OH minus 1. And this, and produces the H plus 1. Sometimes this happens. कि आपका पानी जो है ना, like if there's a river flowing, the water molecules are constantly bumping into each other, and some of the water molecules might break into pieces, and they would that would result in the production of two ions. One of them is H plus 1, the other one is OH ions. और ये reversible है. Reversible का मतलब होता है कि the opposite might also happen, that they can actually combine. So this is a reversible arrow. That means the reverse could also happen, that the H plus 1 and the OH ions might get together to form the water molecule back again. अच्छा, तो ये clear है कि there'll be two ions that are going to be produced. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So सारों को clear है ना? कोई और बात clear है? Zaria, Rabia, is this clear? Ayan? उसमें chat में yes or no लिख दिया करो. अच्छा, so the thing is कि so the thing is that when you think of water, it's not just water. When you take a glass of water, it's not just water, right? Because some of the water molecules might be bumping into each other and might be breaking down into H plus 1 and OH ions. So the next time when you see a glass of water, it's just not going to be these blue water molecules. There would be a few H plus 1 and a few OH ions as well. So आपके पानी के अंदर ना, there's not just water molecules, but you'll have lots and lots of H plus 1 and OH minus 1 as well, because some of the water molecules might be breaking down into pieces during those violent reactions. So आपका जो medium है ना, that so when you think of, from now on, when you think of water, it's not just water. It's not just H2O. It's along with H2O, you've got H plus 1 and OH ions as well. Yani mere blood mein na, there's H plus 1 and there's OH ions as well. The water in the cells, the solution in my cells, it's got H plus 1 and OH ions as well. The water, tap water that you drink, it's not just H2O, it's got H plus 1 and OH ions as well. Okay? The river is not just H2O, it's got a lot of H plus 1 and OH ions as well, right? So your solution, any solution, most solutions that you think of, they're actually made up of water. They'll also have H plus 1 and OH ions. Now, this solution will be of three different types. Okay, there's going to be H plus 1 and there's going to be OH ions. Sometimes what will happen is that your solution will have equal quantity of H plus 1 and OH ions. So the quantity of H plus 1 and the quantity of OH ions, they would be exactly the same. इसके ऊपर एक सेकेंड. This is called neutral. It's called neutral pH, or you call it pH 7. जब आप कहते हैं ना किसी चीज का pH जो है ना वो 7 है, तो उसका मतलब ये होता है कि the amount of H plus 1 and the amount of OH ions in the solution is exactly the same.
It's neutral.
So that's what neutral is. So now imagine if I add an acid to this water. Acid का क्या काम था? What does an acid do? It's a molecule that produces what? H plus one ions, right? It releases H plus one ions. So imagine कि मेरा जो solution है ना, I've added an acid to it. What will the acid do? The acid will start producing H plus one ions. Acid एक random molecule है that उसका एक ही काम होता है. It produces H plus one ions, right? So what has happened to my solution now? The quantity of H plus one is now greater than the quantity of OH ions. Okay, that is exactly what an acid does. So acid is a molecule that releases or gives off H plus one ions. So आपका जो solution होगा ना उसमें all of a sudden the quantity of H plus one ions is going to be a lot higher compared to the quantity of OH ions, and you'll say that your solution has now become acidic. Okay, so one second. So what you'll say is that your solution is now acidic because you've added an acid to it, and the pH is now considered to be less than 7. ठीक है 1-2 हो जाएगा जो भी ना. But is the idea clear? Is the idea clear that adding an acid, normal water के अंदर the quantity of H plus one यहाँ पे आ जाए. If you had a normal water and the water molecules were breaking apart, the quantity of H plus one and the quantity of OH ions were equal. So normal water is neutral. But the moment you put an acid into this, the acid वो अपने H plus one बीच में ना फजूल में add किए जा रहा है. So there's a lot of H plus one now. So the quantity of H plus one in the solution will increase. ठीक है? And that means your solution has become acidic. So what do acids do? They increase the quantity of H plus one ions. They release a lot of H plus one ions. ठीक है? How they do that, that's a different story. But it's just a molecule that releases H plus one ions. So is this idea clear? What is an acidic solution?
Yes, sir.
ठीक है बाकियों को क्लियर है सारों को सरिया उर्बा रबिया Ayan Amna is this clear अच्छा और फिर base what will a base do base is another molecule that actually consumes all the H plus one ions so if I take my solution जो भी water का solution है and I add a base to it what will a base do the base will start removing all the H plus ions उनको वो consume करना शुरू कर देगा so it will start consuming all the H plus ions eventually the quantity of OH ions will be higher compared to the quantity of H plus ions so that is what a base does कि base जो है ना it will decrease the quantity of H plus ions so the quantity एक second so the quantity of H plus ions is going to be lower compared to the quantity of and that means the solution is now basic and that would mean that pH is greater than 7 pH क्या चीज है उसको छोड़ो अभी ठीक है just ignore pH is just a device that I'll explain pH later on just remember what does neutral mean neutral means that you've got a solution whatever that solution everything is a solution made up of water my blood is a solution made up of water uh, my stomach has a solution in it and that's made up of water the water that you see around you everything is a solution that's made up of water right so it can either be neutral that means you didn't add anything you didn't make it acidic you didn't make it basic if you add an acid to it the acid will produce a lot of H plus ions if you add a base to it the base will consume all the H plus ions तो एक में ना H plus ज्यादा हो जाएंगे the other one the H plus will decrease and the OH ions will be higher so that is so basically when you the next time when you see water right water will be of three types One is neutral, the other one is acidic, then the other one is basic. So the lemon juice that you have, or the orange juice that you have, that's acidic. Orange juice mein na, you've got citric acid. Citric acid is this molecule. It releases a lot of H plus ions. It has all these H plus ions that it releases into the water. Okay, that is what citric acid does. तो वो H plus बढ़ा देता है, ज़्यादा कर देता है. और if you add a base to it, it will decrease the H plus one. That's it. So abhi फिलहाल just keep it basic. Just remember the concept: what is neutral, what is acidic, what is basic, and why is H plus one important. H plus one is important because you have to track H plus one. Because all reactions on planet Earth, all reactions that are happening, they depend on this. They depend on the type of water you have. मेरे सेल में जो भी रिएक्शन हो रहा है ना, that reaction is happening inside a solution, and that solution will have a certain pH. It might be neutral, it might be acidic, it might be basic. My reactions will get affected by that. कि अगर यहाँ पे ना H plus one ज़्यादा हो गए, my reactions are going to get affected. If यहाँ पे OH ions are more in number, right, my reactions are going to get affected. So all reactions that are happening on planet Earth, they depend on the pH. ठीक है, plants पानी consume कर रहे हैं. You give them a water that's acidic, they might die. You give them a water that's basic, they might die. Neutral पे शायद वो ज़्यादा अच्छा survive करे. Same as if I drink water, I want neutral water. I don't want acidic, or I don't want basic. There are other things that actually want acidic and basic. तो लेकिन इसकी फिर आप अगली दफा डिस्कशन करते हैं. लेकिन ये मेन आइडिया क्लियर है, बेसिक आइडिया ठीक है. वो बाद में हम हमारा मेन पर्पस जो है दैट्स making equations. I just wanted to give you an idea what acids and bases is, so we can figure out what the formula of acids and bases is going to be. ठीक है? चलिए ठीक है everyone. ये फिर next time continue करते हैं. ठीक है?
ठीक है सर, अल्लाह हाफिज़.
That's it, sir.
अल्लाह हाफिज़.